Alright, here I got a white PC build here, and we're missing an AIO. So Arctic sent me their Liquid Freezer 3 360 ARGB in the white color to obviously match the aesthetics of this N60 H9 Elite in white. Now they also sent me a set of P12 fans, which I already have them installed on the side as well as the bottom. All we're missing is additional 3 Arctic P12s, which the good thing about this is that they already include 3 additional ARGB fans. So we have the top covered, and we're just missing one more here for the rear. If you want a similar setup here, you will need a total of 10 fans, 3 for the bottom, 3 on the side, 1 for the rear, and 3 on top. So huge thanks to Arctic for sending these out to me so that I can showcase to you guys. Alright, so let's go ahead and unbox the Liquid Freezer 3. Now this also comes in black as well. We can see on the front of the box here that it does include the Arctic MX6. And I do like the fact that of course it supports AM5, AM4, which I'll be using on the Ryzen 7900X. And it does also support Intel as well. So let's go ahead and take a look what's inside. Alright, here we have the actual pump cover here. Alright, here is the pump cover itself. Let's take that out. We have a beautiful Arctic finish on the top that do light up with RGB as well. We can see on the back of it, we have some magnets here that will attach to the actual pump itself. All right, here's the actual pump here. Looks like the actual cold plate does not have thermal paste on it, so we do have to put that on separately, which is not an issue. Go ahead and pull this all out. All right, what I like about this so far is that the fans are automatically installed, which is going to save you a lot of time. And you can see where the connectors are. All of them are already pre-connected for you. So I'd definitely love to see that. The actual radiator itself is pretty thick here. We have Arctic here. And it comes in this really nice, beautiful white color. The tubes themselves feel really nice and sturdy as well. And all of our hardware should be located further inside. Next, we're going to have 2 separate connectors here. The first one's going to be a splitter cable. So this is if you want to connect each individual function separately on your motherboard. So for example, you have the pump, you have the fan, and then you have the VRM, and all of these 3 can be independently controlled. And then you have the actual connector that goes into the AIO, and then you have this one here, and this is for an all-in-one solution here. So instead of having it controlled separately, you can just have this power connector connected, and that should be able to control all 3 simultaneously. But if you want more customization, then this would be a better option, of course, because you can individually control each one. All right, here we have an AMD accessories here, which is the one that I'm going to use personally because I am using an AM5 CPU. All right, further side, we're going to have some brackets here. They are labeled L and R. You get a bunch of screws to screw in your radiator, a 6-sided Allen wrench, and a 0.8 gram tube of MX6 thermal paste. And finally, we have a metal frame here. Now, this one specifically says LGA 1700 1851. So if you have an Intel CPU, you would want to use this. But since we're on AM5, we don't need to use this. All right, interestingly enough, there is no manuals inside the box. However, you can pull up a user manual on Arctic's website. I'll also link it in the description box below. I really like their instruction manual sets because they have images and a lot of graphics showing you different orientations. So for example, it kind of tells you different orientations of the radiator. Of course, you never want to put the radiator all the way on the bottom. You can have it on the top, you can have it side mounted, whether you have the tube on the bottom or on the top. I mean, both of it is sufficient as long as you're aware of how the actual tubes go. I really like that a lot, and it even goes so far as to kind of show you exactly how it goes in very graphically, which is really awesome. But follow this video and I'll show you exactly what needs to be done. Now for AM5, we're going to be using these 2 brackets here. Now this is for AM5. For Intel, you will use the other CPU frame. We're also going to be using the 4 standoffs and the 4 screws specifically for the AMD. So with that out of the way here, depending on how you want to have it mounted, of course, I'm going to have it top mounted in my example here. So the H9 Elite has a separate top mounted bracket. It makes it very easy to just attach your AIO and then drop it back in. So since we're having it top mounted, this is the top mount bracket from the N60 H9 Elite, and I would position the actual top bracket like this, so that when I put it on top, I have the tubes facing on the right sides, which should look really nice. We're going to use the 12 screws with the washer as well, and we're just going to screw them in. All right, and I personally like to start with the top left and bottom right, so that way all the additional screw holes are more aligned. All right, now I have all 12 screws in, and now we're ready to drop this on the actual case here. Now the reason why I wanted to have the tubes on the right side is because you'll notice all of these cables are facing this side, so the back of the case here, and this would be the fronts of it. So when you're looking at it from the front, everything's going to be clean. If you have the radiator on the other side, keeping the same fans, let's say for example like this, you're gonna notice all these wires, which looks pretty terrible. Now I personally like to put the AIO on the case first. That way I can prepare the CPU section and attach the other connector as well. So let's go ahead and drop it on my case first. All right, so this is how the top of the H9 Elite looks like here. And all I have to do is grab the top bracket here. Make sure I feed the pump right in the middle. I can drop it nice and slow. All right, now that I have that in, I can go ahead and screw these in. And again, every PC case is different, of course. So a slight issue with screwing this top bracket here. The important thing to note is that this radiator is very, very thick. And I'm gonna show you in the back here. So the screw wasn't going in because you can see where the fans fit, but it was basically interfering with the CPU power cable over here. So I had to push all the wires all the way on the side just so that this could drop in and I can basically screw this in. So one thing to really consider about this case is definitely make sure that your case will support this very thick radiator. I'm going to turn it around to show you a little bit better. Now you can see the thickness of this radiator is very, very thick here. You'll notice right in the bottom here where the cables are, it is very, very tight fit here. So you see I have to push this all the way down to the corner just to make enough space and enough clearance so that this could fall down. Now I did spin the fan very, very carefully here. You don't want to spin it too much, but we do have clearance, so that's not going to be an issue at all. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and screw in these last two screws here of the H9 Elite. And these were the screws where I was having an issue trying to screw them in because it was not going in. All right, that went in nice and smooth. Now for the next part here is we're going to lay down the case, and I find that laying down the case is going to be the easiest. All right, now we're ready to prep up our motherboard here. If you haven't done so already, you should have your CPU already installed. So since I am on AM5, I'll be dropping in the Ryzen 9 7900X. So first thing we're going to do here is bring this latch down so we can lift this up, and then we can take our CPU here. And as always, locate the triangle on the top left, and we just drop it down. And then place that down and bring this latch all the way down again. Take that cover out. And there we have our CPU installed. We definitely want to have the CPU installed because once we install this bracket here, you're not going to have space to install the CPU. So with that out of the way, the next thing we have to do is remove these two brackets up here. So using a Phillips screwdriver, we're just going to unscrew each of those screws. You see it comes out very easily. And the last one. So we're going to leave this to the side real quick because we are going to open up our AMD packet here, which is going to include 4 screws and 4 spacers. So we want to first start off with the spacers. They're going to go on these screw holes here that we just removed. So we're going to attach each spacer on each one. Now that we have all 4 spacers in, go ahead and grab one of the sides. I'm going to start with the left one. And my recommendation is to kind of pre-install a screw here and have a Phillips screwdriver ready because they're a little bit tricky to install once they're on top of the spacer here, and kind of just pre-screw. Okay, I don't want to tighten the screws yet. Now I can start tightening them. All right, now we have the left bracket secured. Same thing, we're going to grab the next bracket here. Let's start with the right side. And just like I said, it's a little bit tricky because you could kind of attach it on top, but sometimes the bracket kind of falls because it's slippery, which is why I recommend pre-installing a screw here and having a Phillips screwdriver already ready. All right, now we have both brackets installed. So before installing the actual pump itself, we still need to apply a thermal paste on the CPU itself. And we also want to make the decision of which one of these connectors we're going to actually use. Now, this is great if you want it to be very simple. However, if you want more control, then using this connector might be a better option because this one has 3 separate connectors here, which individually controls each component. So we have one specifically to control the AIO pump. We have one to individually control the VRM, and finally we have one to control the actual fan speeds on your radiator itself. Now you definitely might want this if you want to keep the pump close to 100%, whereas you don't want everything else to be running at 100%. So this is the option that I'm personally going to go for. Now thankfully this motherboard has 3 headers here. It has CPU optional, and it has an AIO pump. So I will basically put the pump to AIO pump, fan to CPU fan, and the VRM to CPU optional. So for this, I'm going to connect. Make sure we squeeze that in. Okay, and let's go ahead and peel this off. All right, so now we are ready to install the pump. But before we do that, we have to apply some thermal paste, of course. So very simply, I am going to start applying it. So just unscrew the cap here. And once you're done, you want to just cap it in. And I should have enough for another 1 to 2 applications. Next thing, we're going to grab the pump itself. Make sure you peel this off, and there's a huge warning sign, of course. And now we want to start installing it, making sure we have the tubes on the bottom. And then as we're laying it down, we want to position it to the middle here where there's the 2 screw openings here. And it'll probably be easier to have a screwdriver ready in hand so that you can start screwing it in place. So I'm just going to, then once you have it in, go ahead and start screwing it in. So as you're screwing it in, you definitely want to screw in one side just a little bit, and then the other side you want to then continue to screw it in. And you don't want to over tighten it, just make it tight enough where you can't turn it anymore without excessive force. But with that being said, we have this nice and installed here. Now again, the actual tubes here do block the pathway of this M.2 heatsink, unfortunately. So that's something that you definitely have to consider as well. Now, when installing the pump here, I did notice that there is some interference with this heatsink that's pre-installed on the RG Strix XA70-A. Now, I quickly looked into Arctic's site here, and it actually turns out that the XA70A does have an issue, of course, because of the height of the M.2 sinks. And this applies to a lot of the ASUS's motherboards with a really high heatsink here. You'll notice that a lot of the other ones work out perfectly fine. So that's definitely very concerning, of course. Now, they do say that they will provide you with a suitable heatsink here. Obviously, something is going to be lower here. So what I'm going to have to do here is I'm just going to remove it quickly. I'm going to remove this because thankfully I have an SSD that comes with a pre-installed heatsink instead. So I'll use this instead just so I can finish the installation of this pump. So with that out of the way, we have a couple of connectors here that we should start connecting here. So the first one here, we have the 5-volt addressable RGB, and this is responsible for controlling the RGB element of our fans, and also this as well, since this does have RGB as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to locate an addressable RGB, which on my motherboard I have it on the top right, and I kind of want to make sure I hide the cable, so I'm going to tuck it underneath some of these over here, and we're just going to plug it in. And of course, you want to match these holes here. There's a total of 3, but you'll see that there's one missing here. And whenever you're looking at the pins on the motherboard itself, make sure they match. All right, we got that plugged in. Now we're going to plug in these 3 cables here. Once again, if you're just using the all-in-one connector, just connect it to your motherboard where it says CPU fan. And to make things very easy, you always want to reference your motherboard's manual or quick start guide, whichever one you have. But you'll notice right here on my motherboard, I have CPU fan, CPU optional, and AIO pump, which are these 3 over here. So starting off with the pump here, it's going to be on the right side. Same thing here, we have 4 pins here, but we also have this little slot here that we want to make sure we match it with this as well. So it's on the right side. So as you're putting this in, make sure that this is on the right side as well. It should go in like this. All right, and next thing here, we have the VRM. Now the VRM, I'm going to do it on the CPU optional, which is the one on the middle. And finally, we have the fan control. And that's going to be where the CPU fan is going to be. All right, now that we have all cables in, we can start tucking these cables in. I'm going to tuck these cables in like this because when I'm behind the case, I can kind of pull the cables and tuck them in easier. So for now, we're just going to make sure we have a clear pathway. And our last step here should be just this cover. which actually looks really nice. You can see here. And all we're going to do here is we're going to drop it right on top. It should snap. All right, now that we have that in, I'm going to go ahead and lift up the case here, and we're going to push these cables back, and we're going to install one last fan here right on the rear. So let's go ahead and lift the case up. Now, because of the size of the radiator, the fan, and the fact that this case doesn't have a lot of space to accommodate, trying to tuck in the cables behind is a little bit challenging. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to lift the bracket up, and that should give me enough space to push these cables and tuck them in more in the back behind the actual fans. And again, this is going to vary depending on the case that you have. By lifting up the bracket here, it gives me enough space so I can push all these cables back. All right, and now that I've tucked all the cables back, it looks a million times better. Now, it does help having a white motherboard if you're going for the white color, or if you have a black motherboard and you have the black color version, and then it'll be easier to hide the cables, making it less distracting. You can see I tucked in the cables like kind of underneath here, just like that, just to, you know, make it less obvious. And now we're just going to install one last Arctic fan for the rear, and we can go ahead and power everything up. All right, and on my H9 Elite case here, we're going to position this one for rear exhausts. First, I'm going to tuck these wires on the raceways that I have here, so that way we can hide these cables. So just like that, I want to make sure these cables are passed through whatever raceways you have on your case. And now we're able to just position the screws. All right, now we have the fan installed on the rear, and you can take a closer look how it looks here. And again, the top three are going to be exhaust, and then the bottom three fans and the three side are going to be set to intake. So we're pretty much done with all the fan orientation. We have a total of 10 fans here, which is nice. Now, since we already attached the rear fan, let's go ahead and plug in the actual cables on the back. All right, here's how the back is looking here. Now, you'll see that these are the cables for the rear fans. I've already routed all of the other case fans here, so you'll notice most of the connections are on the bottom. Now, being that the PSU is in the way, what I'm going to do here in this scenario is momentarily remove the PSU so I can have these cables behind the power supply. That way it kind of runs all the way down here, and I can just plug one of the addressable RGBs with one of the set fans, and I should have enough space to connect the power. All right, so I just quickly removed the PSU, and now we have the wires behind the PSU, making it a lot cleaner, easier to manage. Now, as you can see, the length here does not allow me to connect the power to one of the system fans on the bottom here. It's this one that I will need to connect, but I don't have enough space. So instead, I'm going to connect this one to one of these. Now, these lead to the bottom fans that I already have. It's going to basically share the power and RPM signals here. And same thing here, I have an additional adjustable RGB that I can chain up. So all I have to do here is remove this one right here to reveal the 3-pin, and all I'm doing here is just connecting them together. All right, as you can see here, I have the adjustable RGB connected, and I have the power signal as well. So everything is nicely connected here. And again, since all of these have Y splitters, the cable management might look a little bit tricky here, but so far I think it's perfectly fine. Now, you could always just purchase a separate hub to better connect everything all together if you want that. However, I just went with the option of just connecting everything directly to the motherboard. So let's go ahead and power this on. So first time firing it up, we already have power on the motherboard here. I do have to install Windows again on this, so bear with me, but for now, let's go ahead and power this on here and see how it sounds. All right, as you can see here, we have power on all of the fans. Everything is powering on, even the RGB on the AIO, which is really nice. And these are the default rainbow colors. Now, what I'm noticing right from the start is that that top left fan is not spinning because of this wire here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to power this off completely and make sure that's working. All right, take two. All I did was I removed the black wire, the CPU cable, more towards the corner to allow space for this fan here. You can see if I push it just a little bit, we have enough clearance. Now, I moved the cable previously. However, since I removed the top bracket to make room for all of these cables, I completely forgot about the black wire here, and that's why this was not spinning. So it's really important to kind of make sure all the fans are spinning. And sometimes you're gonna hear noises too. If you hear any weird noises or you don't see any fans spinning, you wanna make sure it has full clearance here. So second try here, let's go ahead and power it on. And as you can see here, the top left fan is spinning. I'm gonna bring you closer here so you can hear any type of liquids. You see the VRM fan spinning as well. We have beautiful rainbow RGB coloring that we can definitely change once we get it. So as you can see, everything is powered on, and we have your standard new CPU installed. So I'm gonna go ahead and set everything up, install Windows, and I'll meet you guys back here so that we can go ahead and change the colors of the RGBs. All right, now before I proceed further, this is the BIOS menu of the X870A, but you will see here, we have the fan profile here. We can see the CPU fan, CPU optional, and the AIO pump here, and those are all the ones that we connected prior. We can see the AIO pump, the RPM, and CPU fan is going to be the top fans on top of the radiator, as you can see here. And CPU optional, that is the rates of the VRM, which is this internal fan here. I don't know, let me see if I can remove this here. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do this, but let's just do it. Yeah, you see the fan just stop spinning here. Let's go ahead and put it back in. Actually, you know what? And if I remove it, you'll notice that the CPU optional is NA. And once I put this back in, I don't really recommend doing this. You can see the fans are starting to spin, and you'll see the RPM starting to kick up here to 1000 RPM. And then we have the chassis fan here. So the chassis fans that I have at the moment is fan 1 and fan 5. Now I have additional system fan options here. The biggest challenge with the P12s is that the length of the cable sometimes is not long enough to reach, so I did have to pair the rear with, I believe I paired it with the bottom fans, and then the side fan has its own separate RPM. So at the moment I can control 5 separate speeds here, but for now I'm going to go ahead and install Windows real quick, and then we can take a deeper dive on the AIO and all of these fans here. All right, now that we have everything set up, I'm gonna show you guys exactly how you're able to adjust the fan curves of the P12s, as well as your arc to cooler, and how to adjust the RGB settings of your fans. Now, a lot of this is gonna be dependent on your motherboard choice. Depending on which brand you go for, you can adjust the fan curves via the BIOS settings and using their software to be able to control the fan curves. Now, there may be some third-party applications that allow you to change it. However, I personally am not aware of one, so if anyone knows, you're more than welcome to share it in the comment section below. Now, since I have the ROG Strix motherboard, or if you have any ASUS motherboard, then you would use a software called Armory Crates. So using your motherboard software, you'll be able to find more details of your fan speeds and things like your temperatures and all that good stuff here. So right over here on the dashboard, we can see our CPU is hovering about 36 degrees Celsius, and this is going to be idle temp. And over here under fan, we click on fan here, we can see the RPMs of all of our fans. So if you wanted to adjust the fan curves here on your motherboard, you want to look for anywhere that says fan control. But in Armory Crate, we have fan expert. So when I click on fan expert, it will take me to this over here. You can see fan expert 4. And this is where I can adjust the fan curves. And you can see here the only options I can select are the current fans that are detected by the motherboard. You'll see these chassis fans are grayed out because I don't have any fans attached to these, so I can only control all of these over here. Now, depending on your motherboard, you might have the option to auto-tune these actual fans like I have on here. So with auto-tuning it, it basically optimizes it and gives you 4 separate profiles here. So I have silent, standard, turbo, and I have full speed. Now right now they're on silent, I believe, and if I were to hit full speed, then this will basically kick everything into high speed, and you should start hearing the fans. You'll notice again, everything is pretty much high, so everything is overdrive. However, I like to keep it at silence, all depending on what you want to do. Now, you may have a motherboard that has an awesome feature called AI cooling, for example, to find the best fan curve that is optimized for your CPU temperatures. Now, when it comes to the RGB elements, again, same thing, your motherboard software will have an option to change the RGB elements. In Armory Crate, you have something that's called Aura Sync. Other brands might call it something completely different. And here it will detect all of the components that the motherboard can control. Now the adjustable LED strips is what's responsible to control the RGB on all of these fans, including the VRM on the Arctic cooler. So you can see here that they're all synced right now. If I uncheck the addressable LED strip, then that basically disables the sync, and you'll notice that all of the lights from the fans have completely changed. Same thing if I were to disable the memory, it would probably default to just the rainbow as you saw there. But if I want everything to sync up, then I would want to have everything checked, and you'll notice everything starts to sync everything together. Now under Aura Effects is where you can have more customization depending on the color you want. You have these pre-effects here. So under statics is where you can control the different color aspects. So if I want to make them all red, I click on red. If I want to make them all yellow and so forth, you can basically change all of these colors and have them all synced, and that's just the easiest way to do it. Of course, we have effects like breathing, strobing. If you want to have them all blacked out, you also have that option as well, but I'm going to keep it as static for now. Now, if you want more individual control, again, depending on how advanced your motherboard allows you to change, on the Aura Sync, there's an advanced effect here called Aura Curator. And on here is where you can make a lot of changes, very advanced changes, for example. So what this does is that it basically graphs out all of the RGB signals here, and you can add so many different effects. You can control each individual one, set layers, and all of that good stuff. Very similar to Signal RGB. That's another third-party software you could use as well. But if I click on Advanced Effects, I have one already. I tried to spell turquoise, but I misspelled it. But if I click on this, I basically made it so that each one of them had their own separate colors, so you can see how you can actually change them. So taking a closer look here, you'll notice that the bottom are set to yellow, and because the bottom fans and the rear are synced up with the same adjustable RGB, the lights are going to be the same. The sides have its own separate ARGB lane, so that one I set to green, and the top I set to a blue color. Now because the adjustable RGB that's connected, you'll notice that all the colors are the same. So that means that whatever color I choose for the top fans, the VRM will also be the same exact color. And overall, these are very advanced custom settings. I like to just personally keep it at basic, maybe do a static color, maybe keep it all white. Going back to the temperatures here, keep in mind that this is the Ryzen 9 7900X, which are known to run hotter on idle, and they're designed to withstand very high temperatures. So if you have an AM5 processor and you're noticing your idle temperatures are a little bit higher than usual, then I wouldn't be concerned too much. Even if it's floating between 40 to 50, I think that's perfectly normal. But in the sense of the Arctic freezer, I think it does a really great job of maintaining the idle temps and keeping it as quiet as possible, which I've really appreciated. I think the Arctic Freezer 3 is a great option as long as all of your components are compatible. The massive size of this radiator, that can be a challenge to a lot of other cases out there. So it's something that you have to really research and make sure your PC has full compatibility. I think the size of the H9 Elite is more on the medium size. So if you're someone who is picking a larger case, like a full-size PC case, then you should have no issues. If you're using a medium-sized case, just keep in mind that you may run into some compatibility issues, especially for the motherboard. As you saw earlier, the X870A, unfortunately, the heatsink could have some issues here. So I did have to, of course, remove this piece here. Instead, of course, I use a SSD with a heatsink. Or you can reach out to Arctic for them to send you out a replacement heatsink, so that way you can use a standard NVMe drive. Another thing that you definitely have to point out is the offsets on AM5. The tubings can get in the way if you're planning on vertically mounting your GPU, so that's one thing that you definitely have to consider. Thankfully, this 4070 Ti Super is thick enough where the clearance is not that bad at all. But I will say that because the radiator is so large, these tubes hang down a lot lower, which blocks this RGB lighting here. Now I could play with the tubings here and maybe position more in the back. However, it would probably push this more to the front. That's something that I personally don't want. Just keep in mind, again, it's gonna all depend on your case here. As for the P12s, I think the fans are really nice, especially the price for these fans. I mean, a pack of 3, you're getting it for under $45, and that's a great value compared to more expensive fans like the Leon SL Infinity fans that cost more than double the price of it. So if you're looking for budget-friendly fans that offer great performance and most importantly quiet operation, then this is definitely a great option as well. I do want to see Arctic provide a reverse blade option of these fans. I think providing that option would be great because looking at the design of the actual fans, in my opinion, I think will look even better. But other than that, the quality and price that you get from Arctic is great. But let me know in the comment section below what you think of the freezers and the P12s. I think they look great and it performs very well. I want to thank Arctic again for sending me the AIO and all the fans here so I can have a more complete setup, so that way I can showcase to you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Firewolf out.